All right, so are you ready to dive deep into Severance? I bet you've heard the buzz about this show.
2 seasons in as of March 2025, and it's a total mind bender.
A total mind bender is right. It asks this crazy question. What if you could surgically separate your work memories from your personal life? Like you just walk out of the office and poof, no more work stress.
That's the world of Severance.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack what makes it so captivating.
The plot twists, the characters, the themes that'll make you think all week.
All without spoiling the big reveals.
Right, exactly. We want you to enjoy the journey. So let's start with the basics. What does it mean to be severed?
So picture this. A chip implanted in your brain. It creates two separate consciousnesses. Your innie, who only exists and remembers things at work, and your outie, who lives your life outside the office, totally oblivious to what your innie experienced during the day.
Two versions of you walking around, but they never meet.
Right. It's like a constant mental tug of war.
And this all happens at Lumon Industries.
Yeah, this massive, mysterious corporation that employs severed workers.
Mm-hmm.
But they keep their true motives and the actual nature of the work completely secret.
Which, I don't know about you, but that definitely sets off some alarm bells for me. It's giving me big brother is watching you vibes.
Sure, but I mean, haven't you ever wished you could just shut off work mode the second you left the building?
Oh, absolutely.
Severance kind of makes that a reality. It explores both the allure, like leaving all those deadlines and annoying colleagues behind, but also, the potential downsides.
Right. Is it dream come true or a total nightmare?
Exactly. That's what the show really makes you question. Is it worth the price?
Right. Okay. Let's meet the folks caught up in all this. We've got Mark Scout. He's our main character. What's his deal?
Mark is really interesting. He chose to be severed to cope with the grief of losing his wife.
Oh.
So his outie carries that weight of sadness, but his innie, at least during work, gets a break from it all.
Seeking solace in this separation, but it's obviously not a perfect solution. Do we see that internal struggle play out?
Absolutely. His yearning for connection, even as he tries to escape his grief, makes him so compelling. And then there's the team he works with, all dealing with this in their own way. That just adds to the tension.
Okay, let's talk about his colleagues. Who should we meet first?
Let's start with Helly Riggs. She's the rebellious new recruit who's like, wait, what is going on here? She questions everything about Lumon. She's a total firecracker, and she doesn't fit into that culture of blind obedience.
So that's got to make for some interesting workplace dynamics. Anyone else?
Well, there's Dylan George, the veteran. He's seen it all. He's super loyal to his colleagues, but deeply cynical about Lumon and their motives. He brings this much-needed sense of humor to the show.
Okay, so we got the skeptic. Always got to have one of those to keep things real. Who else rounds out this team?
Last but not least, we have Irving Bailiff. He's almost the opposite of Helly. He's like a rule follower to the max. He embraces everything about Lumon, worships their founder, Keir Egan.
So we got this fascinating mix of personalities, but here's the thing. None of them actually know what they do at Lumon.
Exactly. They're officially in, quote, macro data refinement, end quote, which basically means they're sorting numbers on screens all day.
Sorting numbers. That sounds thrilling.
Yeah, and the show keeps you guessing about what those numbers actually represent, what Lumon's real purpose is, what happens if you sort them wrong.
Oh, man. I'm getting anxiety just thinking about sorting numbers all day long with zero context. But that mystery, that's what keeps people hooked, right?
Oh, for sure. The not knowing, the constant feeling that something's off. That's what drives the suspense. And then there's the whole atmosphere, the rituals, the surveillance, the constant feeling of being watched. It all gets under your skin.
So, like, how creepy are we talking? Give me some examples.
Well, there is these mandatory wellness sessions led by this character, Miss Casey. They're supposed to be for employee well-being, but they feel more like, well, brainwashing. And then you've got Mr. Milchick. He's always popping up, always smiling. But those eyes, he's unsettling.
So, not exactly your typical office. And all this is before things really start to go off the rails, right? What kicks the plot into high gear? Okay, so we've got this creepy workplace, a huge mystery, and characters who are starting to question everything. Where does the story go from there?
Things get really dark when a former Lumon employee, Petey, tries to warn Mark about the company's secrets.
Oh, no.
But then he just disappears.
That's not suspicious at all.
Right. So this obviously sends Mark down a rabbit hole trying to find some answers. And his innie is suspicious, but his outie is totally clueless.
Right.
And then there's Helly. She's really rebelling against Lumon. She wants to communicate with her outie to figure out why she's even there.
Yeah, like how does she even end up at this place? Okay, so it sounds like things are about to blow up. Does season 1 leave us hanging? Are there any big cliffhangers?
Oh yeah, huge cliffhanger. The season finale hits you with some major twists and revelations, and you're left wanting so much more.
I hate that, but I also love it.
Yeah, but I won't spoil anything.
Okay, good.
Let's just say the innies realize that they're trapped.
Oh my gosh.
They can't quit. Only their outies can make that decision.
Wow. So that raises the question, what happens when you lose control over your own identity and the choices you make?
It's heavy stuff, right? It really makes you think about the boundaries of the self. Like, if you're only aware of part of your life, are you really in control?
Not really. I mean, not fully. Right.
Okay, and that's where season 2 picks up. What can you tell us about where it goes next without giving too much away?
Well, the stakes get even higher. Mark and his team are more determined than ever to figure out what Lumon is really up to. And then the line between the innies and the outies gets blurrier.
Okay, now you have to intrigue me. What does that mean? Blurry or how?
Well, let's just say that reversing the procedure becomes a possibility. So now we have to think about reintegration. What would happen if these two consciousnesses merged back together?
Well, that's a whole other layer to this. Would that be a good thing or just create a whole new set of problems? That is the question, right? Could it be a path to freedom for the innies, or would it just lead to more chaos and trauma?
It makes my head spin just thinking about it. And what about Mark's outie life? Does that become more mixed up with the Lumon stuff?
Definitely. We see his sister, Devon, and her husband, Rickon, become more involved in the fight against Lumon. They represent this growing awareness in the outside world that maybe this whole severance thing isn't so ethical.
So it's not just about those stuck inside Lumon anymore. The impact is spreading.
Exactly. The show expands outward, which is really cool. And we get to learn more about Lumon itself, the strange culture, the devotion to Keir Egan, the founder. It's almost like a cult.
Okay, speaking of creepy, tell me more about that. What makes it feel cult-like?
So it's not robes and chanting or anything.
Okay, good.
But there is this intense vibe. Egan created these 4 temperaments.
Oh.
Woe, frolic, dread, and malice. And they're woven into everything at Lumon. Employees are supposed to embody them in their work. It's so ritualistic and strange.
And then you've got that office. It's like its own character in the show, right? It adds to the whole creepy feeling.
Totally. Those endless white hallways.
Yeah.
The retro technology. It's like a sterile maze.
I would get lost in there in a heartbeat. And the wellness sessions with Miss Casey, those were always so weird, right?
They always hinted at something darker, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe Lumon is using these sessions to control the innies even more.
Oh, man, like implanting thoughts. Okay, that's my nightmare.
Right. And then there's the outside world. The way they show it, it's so bleak and depressing.
You almost forget there's a whole world outside Lumon.
Right. It makes you think, why would anyone want to have this procedure if life beyond Lumon is so bad?
Yeah.
Like, what are they running from?
Yeah. Maybe the controlled environment of Lumon, even with all the weirdness, just feels safer than the chaos of real life.
Right. Maybe it's like a commentary on our own anxieties, you know?
Yeah.
How much are we willing to give up for a sense of order and control?
Okay, we've talked a lot about the plot and the themes, but let's get back to the characters for a second. We know Mark and his team, but who else should we be paying attention to?
Well, Mark's boss, Mrs. Harmony Cobell, she's really fascinating. So loyal to Lumon, but you can sense that she's got her own issues going on.
She always seemed like she was hiding something.
Right. And then there's Mr. Milchick. So cheerful, but there's something off about him. Always watching, always listening.
He gave me the creeps every time he was on screen.
Yeah. And then there's Miss Casey, the wellness counselor. Her connection to Mark gets even more intense in season 2. We learn more about her past, and it blurs the lines between the innies and the outies even more.
So even more mysteries to unravel. I'm also curious about Bert. He seems like a bright spot in all this darkness.
He is. Bert's story is actually really heartwarming. He finds love with Irving, who works in another department. It's a reminder that even in Lumon's rigid, controlled environment, human connection can still happen.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom, but I have to say, the style of the show is a big part of what makes it so effective.
Totally.
Those long takes, the stark settings, the music.
Yeah, the visuals and the sound design are so well done. And the color palette, it's mostly whites and grays, with little bits of red or green.
It's like the world has been drained of color.
Yeah, and I think that reflects the character's emotional state so well. And the dialogue, too. The dry humor they throw in there, it's brilliant.
It's such a unique blend of tension, humor, and social commentary.
Right. It's what makes Severance so much more than just a typical sci-fi thriller.
Speaking of social commentary, let's talk about what this show is really saying about us.
Yeah.
It feels like it's critiquing modern work culture, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Lumon's obsession with productivity, those dehumanizing practices, that idea that work should be your whole life. Does any of that sound familiar?
Sadly, yes. I think we've all felt that pressure to always be on, even if it means sacrificing our own well-being.
And Severance just takes it to the extreme, right? It shows us what happens when work literally takes over a piece of you and you're left feeling empty.
It's a scary thought. What about the themes of privacy and autonomy? Those feel really relevant these days, especially with how much we're online.
Oh, absolutely. Severance makes us think about what happens when we give up control, whether it's to technology, corporations, or even our own desire to escape.
It's like those innies. They chose to have the procedure, but they ended up losing a part of themselves.
Right.
It's a big warning about the potential downsides of technology, even if it seems helpful at first.
Like all those apps and devices we use. Are they really making our lives better, or are they taking away our freedom?
It makes you think. And then there's that central question, is severance freedom or just another form of control?
Right. Lumon says it's a way to achieve work-life balance.
But something tells me it's not that simple.
Severance shows the dark side, the potential for manipulation and exploitation.
It's not black and white. It's about recognizing how complex technology is and how it can be used for good or for bad.
And thinking critically about those potential consequences, not just jumping on board with every new invention.
Okay, before we wrap up part 2, I'm curious, how did Severance come about? Where did the idea come from?
You're not going to believe this, but the creator, Dan Erickson, got the idea from a boring office job. He just started daydreaming about what it would be like to totally separate his work life from his personal life.
It's crazy how the most mundane things can inspire such creative ideas. And the casting is perfect. Adam Scott as Mark, he's so good at playing that quiet desperation.
He's perfect. And Ben Stiller, who directed some of the episodes, really wanted him for that mix of vulnerability and humor.
It definitely works. What about those filming locations? Did they film it in an actual office?
They used the Bell Labs Homedale complex in New Jersey for Lumon's headquarters.
Oh, wow. I can definitely see that. It's got that retro-futuristic vibe that just fits the show so well. And, I mean, we can't forget all the awards and critical acclaim. 94% on Rotten Tomatoes for season 1.
There's a reason everyone's talking about it. It's so well done, and it really makes you think.
It's more than just entertainment, that's for sure. Okay, so we've talked a lot about Severance, the creepy offices, the mysterious procedure, the characters. But now I want to hear from you. What do you think this show is really trying to say? Like, does it resonate with you?
You know, it's so interesting because Severance takes these anxieties we have about work and technology and who we are, and it just blows them up, makes them huge. It's like the show is holding up this funhouse mirror to our lives and making us look at some uncomfortable stuff.
So it's not just a sci-fi thriller. It's like social commentary disguised as entertainment.
Exactly. Think about Lumon and how obsessed they are with productivity, how they dehumanize their employees. This whole thing that work should be your entire existence. Does any of that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, I mean, haven't we all felt that pressure to perform, to always be on, even if it means we're not taking care of ourselves?
Right. And Severance just takes that idea and runs with it.
Mm-hmm.
Shows us this extreme world where work literally takes over part of you, and you're left feeling, I don't know, empty.
It's kind of terrifying when you think about it that way. And then what about the themes of privacy and autonomy? Those feel so relevant, especially with how much of our lives we live online these days.
Yeah, that's huge. Severance makes us ask, what happens when we give up control to technology, to these big companies, even to our own desire to just check out and escape reality?
It's like those innies, they chose to have this procedure, but in the end, they lose part of themselves.
Right. It's a warning about technology, even when it seems like it's there to help us.
Totally. Like all the apps we use, all the devices we're glued to, are they really making our lives better, or are they slowly taking away our freedom?
That's a great question. And it all comes back to that big question at the center of the show. Is severance freedom or just another way to control people?
I mean, Lumon tries to sell it as this positive thing, a way to finally have that work-life balance everyone's always talking about.
But I think we all know it's not that simple. The show does a really good job of exposing that dark side, the potential for manipulation, the way these companies can take advantage of people.
It's not black and white. It's about recognizing that technology is complicated, and it can be used for good or for bad.
And it's about being critical, thinking about the consequences before we just embrace every new shiny thing that comes along.
As we finish up our deep dive into Severance, what's the one thing you want to leave our listeners with? What should they be thinking about as they watch this show?
Here's something to ponder. If you could sever parts of your own life, what would they be? And what would you be willing to give up to do it? Would you sacrifice memories, emotions, experiences, just for a little more efficiency, a little more comfort, a little bit of escape?
Wow, that's a lot to think about. It really gets to the heart of what makes Severance so powerful, right? It's not just a show to watch and forget about. It makes you examine your own life, your own values.
And I think it reminds us that what we used to think of as science fiction is becoming more and more real. The questions Severance asks about who we are, who controls us, what the future of work looks like, those are questions we're all going to be dealing with probably sooner than we think.
It definitely gives you a lot to chew on. If you haven't already, definitely check out Severance. It's one of those shows that will stay with you long after you finish watching it. And let us know your thoughts. We're always up for a good Severance discussion.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.